Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into one of the most fascinating and, frankly, most frustrating contrasts unfolding in the sports world right now. We're talking about Nepal. Here is a nation that is experiencing absolute, unprecedented success on the cricket pitch, while at the exact same time battling a pretty shocking reality when it comes to its physical infrastructure. So let's break down exactly how a country that is producing world-class athletes is struggling so hard to build them a world-class home.
Okay, let's just look at this stark contrast for a second. On one hand, you have pure athletic triumph, right? The Nepali men's senior team qualifying for the massive stage of the T20 World Cup, the under-19 team making serious waves, and the women's team battling it out fiercely. The passion is absolutely undeniable. But the infrastructure reality, well, it's pretty bleak. Despite all this success, Nepal practically relies on just 2 international grounds. And get this, they lack proper floodlights for night games. The infrastructure is literally so bare bones that hardcore fans will risk their lives climbing up into tall trees just to catch a glimpse of their national heroes.
Section 1. The Lotus Stadium Dream. The grand vision for the Gautam Buddha International Cricket Stadium.
Now, to solve this crisis, an incredible idea was born, and the sheer scale of this project was staggering. We're talking about an estimated cost of 2.6 billion Nepali rupees. That's roughly 26 million US dollars. But what makes this number so spectacular is where the money was coming from. It wasn't supposed to be from some massive corporate sponsor or a blank government check. Nope. Spearheaded by the Dhurmus Suntali Foundation, which is actually led by a popular comedian duo, it was meant to be funded almost entirely by public donations. School kids were donating their lunch money, elderly citizens were handing over their pensions, all of them chipping in for this massive 2.6 billion rupee dream.
In the dream itself, it was grand and deeply, deeply patriotic. It wasn't just going to be some boring concrete bowl. The design was shaped like a lotus flower in full bloom, boasting a massive 30,000 seating capacity. It was meant to be a literal monument to Nepal itself. It featured 77 special rooms to represent every single district in the country, 7 massive pillars for the provinces, and an entrance fashioned in a traditional stupa style, which is a beautiful nod to Lumbini, the birthplace of Buddha. Honestly, a true symbol of national unity.
Section 2. Debt, delays, and overgrown bushes. The timeline of a financial collapse.
So what happened? Well, the project peaked super rapidly, but it stalled just as fast. Construction officially kicked off with huge fanfare in January 2019. And by July 2020, even right in the middle of a global pandemic, they had about 15% of the overall work completed. Pretty impressive, right? But then we hit February 2021. To close a growing financial gap, the organizers hosted a Mahayagya, which is a massive 9-day religious fundraising event. They were expecting to pull in nearly 700 million rupees. Instead, they collected under 100 million. It was a huge shortfall, and without those funds, by August 2021, the entire construction site just ground to a halt.
184.3 million Nepali rupees in debt. That right there is the exact reason the tractors stopped. The Dhurmus Suntali Foundation was left holding the bag on these massive unpaid loans, mostly owed to the folks supplying the hardware, the concrete, and the steel. Under the weight of this financial paralysis, the site was simply abandoned. The impressive pillars they had built actually started to rust, and the pitch was just left to overgrow with wild bushes. It's a pretty heartbreaking image.
Section 3. The standoff over debt, financial discrepancies, and political deadlocks.
Now, this massive debt triggered a major standoff, mostly because of some serious questions around financial transparency. It's basically an accounting mess. As you can see here, there are pretty significant discrepancies between the official audits regarding exactly how much money was actually spent before the project froze. The local Bharatpur metropolitan city's audit says 579.2 million rupees were spent, but a totally separate report by the Department of Urban Development lists the expenditure at 630 million rupees. And remember, with millions still actively owed to private companies like Hama Steel and Jagdamba Enterprises, these conflicting numbers make any kind of government rescue effort incredibly complicated.
You can imagine the toll this took. Sitaram Katel, the founder of the foundation, finally hit his breaking point, stating, "I am tired of knocking on the doors of Singh Darbar." Just for a bit of context, Singh Darbar is the seat of the federal government. He was expressing this deep exhaustion and frustration, basically surrendering ownership of the project and pleading for the government to step in, take over this massive liability, and just finish what the public had started.
But, as you might guess, stepping in isn't quite that simple. The local Bharatpur mayor, Renu Dahal, put her foot down, firmly maintaining that the city simply cannot adopt the project in its current financial state.
The local government's stance is strict here. The foundation has to clear all of those outstanding, excessive loans before the city will officially take over the site and restart construction. So we're left with this classic, agonizing stalemate.
Section 4. A nationwide stadium epidemic. Zooming out from Chitwan.
The crazy thing is, this isn't just a local issue in Chitwan. If we zoom out, across the entire country, at least 5 other major international stadium projects are just languishing in limbo. Take the Giraja Prasad Koirala Stadium in Marang. It's been stalled for over a quarter of a century. The Fapla Stadium in Kailali? Still waiting on detailed project reports after a decade. And over in Dang, you've got 2 separate stadiums facing huge hurdles. One is locked in an ownership dispute with the Cricket Association of Nepal, and the other doesn't even have the basic infrastructure to host spectators safely.
To really hammer home just how systemic this failure is, let's look closer at that Girija Prasad Koirala Stadium in Marang. It has literally been over 25 years since the land was acquired for a multi-purpose stadium, and today, essentially only a pitch exists. The project is so severely underfunded, get this, they couldn't even pay the electricity bill for the elderly caretaker who lives on site. His power was cut off for 14 straight months. I mean, no way. That is just wild.
Now, compare the reality of those public infrastructure projects, the ones plagued by decades of delays, budget freezes, and crushing debt, with a recent private development called the Extra Tech Oval. Driven by a 400 million rupee personal investment, nearly half of its entire construction was completed in just a single year. It creates this unquestionable, sharp contrast between paralyzed public initiatives and rapidly progressing private ventures. The difference is night and day.
Section 5. What happens next? Tenders, promises, and the future of Nepali cricket.
So, is it all doom and gloom? Actually, no. There's a glimmer of hope on the horizon for the Lotus Stream in Chitwan. Recently, the federal government stepped in and officially listed the Gautam Buddha Stadium as a national pride project. That's a huge deal because that status unlocked funding, allowing the Bagmat D province to step up and guarantee 520 million rupees to get the gears turning again. The new strategy is way more modular too. Instead of trying to build the full 30,000 seats at once, the government aims to complete an initial 10,000-seater phase first, with fresh construction tenders opening up in mid-2024. Which leaves us with this massive, critical question to ponder as we wrap up. With these new government tenders opening and fresh funds allegedly guaranteed, will the Gautam Buddha Stadium, and honestly all those other stadiums across the country, finally be completed? Or is Nepali cricket, with its World Cup appearances and its wildly passionate fan base, simply destined to outgrow a home that just cannot be built fast enough? It is a gripping story of ambition, bureaucracy, and sport, and you know we'll be watching very closely to see what happens next. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.